So price elasticity of supply is the last of the elasticities, similar to price elasticity of demand, but instead of using the word demand, we're going to use the word supply. So we're going to look at the same things that we did with demand. So we're going to look at the different curves, and we're going to look at the determinants. So your definition: responsiveness of quantity supplied due to a change in price. So instead of demand, we've got supplied, and the formula: percentage change in quantity supplied divided by the percentage change in price. So instead of demand, we've got supply. So it's the same as demand, except you've got the word supply in there. So it shouldn't be too difficult to learn another formula. Right, price elasticity of supply is positive. Now the reason for that is if you think to your supply curve, your upward sloping supply curve, as price goes up, quantity also goes up. So you've got a positive on the top, you've got a positive on the bottom. So your numerical value for PES is going to be positive. Okay, so PES is always going to be positive because as price goes up, suppliers want to supply more. Right, so what we've got here is two diagrams: inelastic supply and elastic supply. So inelastic supply, just like with demand, the inelastic demand was the steep one. It's the same with supply. The inelastic supply is the steep one. And what it's showing you is that for a change in price, we've got quite a big change in price, we've only got a small change in quantity. So what's happening here is the price of the product has gone up, but the supplier isn't able to increase the supply by very much. The key thing here is it's hard to increase supply. It's not that they don't want to increase supply, it's more that it's difficult for them to increase supply. Elastic, we've got the figure greater than 1 and we've got the flatter curve. This time it's easier to increase supply when price increases. So here you've got a price increase, again the same size price increase as before, so 80 to 106, but this time you've got a much bigger increase in quantity. That's because it's easy for the suppliers to increase supply. And then we've got the other ones that we don't really use, but we ought to look at. So the unit, PES is equal to 1. This time it goes through the origin. It's a straight line going through the origin. Perfectly inelastic, it's just like your demand. It's the vertical one, and perfectly elastic, it's just like the demand. It's the horizontal one. So if we look at perfectly inelastic, what that's saying is that you've got a fixed quantity. So whatever the price, the quantity will stay the same. The quantity supplied this time. And perfectly elastic, it's saying that the price is always going to be the same, and if the price is any different, nothing will be supplied, which doesn't really make a lot of sense, but that's what the theory is at the opposite end of the spectrum. So the last thing we're going to look at is the determinants of PES. So what determines whether or not PES is elastic or inelastic? Well, first of all, availability of stocks. What that means is product which is in storage, waiting to be put onto the market. So if they've got high availability of stocks, if they've got a warehouse with lots of stocks of the product, then it's going to be easy to increase supply. So supply is going to be elastic. High stocks, so they've got lots in their warehouse. High stocks is going to be elastic. So high stocks in the warehouse, that means that if the price goes up, it's very easy for them to release those stocks from storage. So you'd have elastic supply. Spare capacity. So is the firm able to increase capacity? Are they able to produce more? So price goes up, can they produce more in response to that price rise? So think about hand gel. We ran out of hand gel. Places that did get hand gel were putting the price up, but we didn't get a massive increase in supply due to that price going up because firms just couldn't increase capacity. They were not able to produce anymore. They were working at full capacity, but they just couldn't increase capacity higher. So we had inelastic supply. So spare capacity, lots of spare capacity means we've got elastic supply. If we have no spare capacity, like the hand gel situation, then that means you've got inelastic supply, so it's going to be hard to increase supply. So that's why we didn't get lots of hand gel on the shelves for quite a few months. It took firms time to adapt, and that's what we look at for the next one. Factor mobility is factor is like your factors of production, land, labour, capital. So how easy is it to move your factors of production to producing something else? So if you've got, for example, a farmer growing apples and pears, if the price of apples goes up, then they want to supply more apples. They could probably use the land that they were using for pears to produce more apples. That's quite easy. Now, during sort of the first lockdown, when we were out of hand gel, using hand gel again as the example, a lot of firms changed what they were doing. So firms that were producing perfume and alcohol were changing their production lines. So they were changing their factors of production. They were getting their workers to move from making alcohol and perfume into making hand gel. The machinery that they were using some of the machinery was similar, so it was easy to switch the machinery. The workers, it's not a particularly skilled job, so it was quite easy to get your workers to switch. So if you can switch from one production to another easily, you have high factor mobility, and therefore you're going to have elastic supply. Now with the hand gel, they were able to switch, but it took time. So that's why we didn't immediately get an increase in supply. So factor mobility, easy to switch, means we're going to have elastic supply. So if it's easy to switch your factors of production from producing one thing to another, you're going to have elastic supply. Let's think of an extreme example. Let's imagine somebody's making violins, and the price of paintings goes up. Two totally different things. You can't really get your worker that was producing a violin to start doing a painting. It's different workers, it's different equipment. It's going to be very difficult to switch. That would be very inelastic supply. So how easy it is to switch determines the elasticity of supply. Easy to switch, it's not just your workers, but it's also your machinery, your factory space as well. Time period. So we talk about hand gel again. In the short run, then it's going to be very inelastic because you can't immediately increase supply of hand gel in the short run because you've got to switch your production lines. You've got to get different materials. Well, some of them are the same, but you've got to get different materials. Need different packaging for your hand gel to what you need for your perfumes, etc. So in the short run, it's going to be inelastic supply. In the longer run, you're going to have more elastic supply. So in the longer run, after 3 months, then they were able to produce more hand gel, so more elastic in the longer run. And that's the final point on elasticity of supply.